Mic check 1 2. It's the Y2K collector, and everyone is quitting, or at least that's the way it seems. It feels like everyone is quitting some version of collecting, whether it's video games, comic books, cars, toys. It seems like 2025 has become the year of the downsizing. And that's based on a lot of what I've seen, even just on Facebook Marketplace, which over the past few weeks, I've been spending more time on there just looking to see what's happening in the, Facebook market space. And I'm seeing more toys, video games, cameras, cars, motorcycles, boats, almost any and everything that's recreational, everything that's non essential. It seems like a lot of people are starting to put these items up for sale because they either no longer need it, no longer use it, or it's just time for them to downsize. And I think that this is very interesting because what tends to happen sometimes in the collecting community is there tends to be a little bit of a like a group think. So once one or two people do something, and then two more people start to do it, and three more people start to do it, then it becomes like this, this trickle down effect where all of a sudden the thing to do is to sell your stuff. And it seems like that's kind of the season that we're in right now, where a lot of people are starting to feel like they need to let things go. And it's almost like this reverse FOMO, right? Like I easily see it turning into this thing where people are starting to feel like if they don't sell fast enough, they're going to miss their window of opportunity to sell, and that it'll get to a place where they can no longer sell even if they want to. Now, the way I look at, downsizing your collection, it's really obviously it's subjective. It's based on you. It's based on where you're at in your collecting journey. It's based on where you're at with your finances. There's a lot of factors that go into when a person decides that they're going to sell their collection, regardless of what it is. If it's video games, cards, cars, toys, phones, whatever, sneakers, it really is a subjective thing. But the thing about the market is that it's not always waiting for you to just decide that you're ready to sell. Sometimes selling requires as much luck as buying, right? Think about all the times that you got a really good deal on something, and how lucky you felt. Well, it's kind of the same thing in reverse if you are in a position where you're trying to sell stuff. 9 times out of 10, when you're trying to sell stuff, especially in a down market for video games, a lot of people are saying, well, you'll be lucky if you get 60%, 70% of price charting value, especially if you're selling in bulk. Now, there's a number of ways that you can sell your items, right? Obviously, we all know that. I'm not going to go into the large number of ways that you could sell your items, but typically the most lucrative way, if you want to make the most money, is just selling the items yourself on one of these selling platforms, whether it be eBay, Mercari. If you decide to go the Facebook Marketplace route, right? Like if you go that route, that's the way that's going to get you the most money. The problem with trying to sell your collection or your games that way, when it's a down market, is that it is going to sit, right? It's going to sit. Your stuff is going to sit. Like if me and another person both have the same copy of Lost Kingdoms 2, and our copies are pretty comparable in terms of condition, what's going to make someone buy their copy over my copy if they're priced exactly the same, right? Or if they're within $10 of each other, most people aren't really going to be wowed by that. So in a down market, let's just say for instance, Lost Kingdoms is a $140 game. Even if I decide I'm going to go ahead and sell this on eBay, in order for people to even pay attention to it, it would have to be priced lower than the competition, right? So I'd have to price this somewhere in the neighborhood of $120 just to even get the traction going, right? So now I've already taken a little over 10% off of the price, right? Or 13% or so. And then eBay's going to take their 15% of whatever you sell for, right? Or however it winds up netting out to being. And so ultimately, you may wind up only getting 90 bucks or so for a, game that price charts at $140. And so you kind of have to say to yourself or think to yourself, all right, well, this is, even if you decide to go and sell it yourself on eBay or Mercari or whatever the case may be, the two challenges are either you sit and wait for someone to buy it at your asking price or lower the price and wind up only getting, 70% or 65% of the value of the game anyway. And so this is the challenge that I think a lot of sellers are going to run into unless they can be very savvy about how they're selling their items, or unless they just get lucky and they happen to list items that someone who's willing to pay the price will pay. Now, right before I went on my vacation, I wound up coming to a really good deal with a buyer. I had a good amount of games and a good amount of consoles that I was trying to remove from my collection, and I was able to negotiate with someone for them to buy my items at 75 to 80% of price charting value. Now, in my opinion, in in 2025, that to me feels like a good deal. Just because it's tough, especially when you're selling in bulk. Because I didn't just sell a few games, I sold about 4 to 5 boxes of games, and it brought in a few $1,000s. Now, can I do a deal like that today? Probably not. Just because it's a timing thing. I did it right before the start of a very popular retro gaming convention, and who knows, that buyer could have been someone who was just looking to add to their inventory before being a vendor at a convention. They didn't really give me details. I didn't give them details about me. It was a cold hard cash deal, and we got it done. But that's not going to be as easy to do. If I were to decide to post my entire collection today, I doubt that someone's going to be willing to pay the tens of thousands of dollars that my collection is worth. But I will say that it really kind of boils down to what you're selling and when you're selling it. And so I think that this is a trend that I'm seeing, where a lot of people are selling stuff. I think the people who are going to have success are going to be the people who not only have, it's not about just selling rare stuff, right? Like, it's not just about selling rare and expensive stuff, because sometimes your stuff could be so rare and so expensive that there isn't a market for it. An example is, if you go on Facebook Marketplace right now, you might see, if you're looking for cars, let's just say, you might see a 2012 or a 2015 Honda Civic posted for, I don't know, $15,000. And you might see, I don't know, someone trying to sell like a vintage Porsche for $30,000. While yes, the Porsche is better than the Honda Civic, it's a more luxurious car. It's probably has a better status. It's probably a car that more people want. There's just a smaller market for that. No one's really, looking for Porsches like that. However, everyone could use a Honda Civic because it's typically known to be a reliable car, good gas mileage, the whole nine yards. And so I think the same could be said for video games. I think if you are a person who's trying to back out of your collection, you're trying to downsize and sell the video games out of your collection, if you're trying to sell like hundreds of common titles, unless you are marking those things down to 40%, and I genuinely mean 40%, 35%, if you're not ready to take that low of a margin on those games will sit. They're going to sit somewhere because people aren't really looking to buy games like that in bulk, especially. Now, let's just say you're on the other end of the spectrum, and let's say you're trying to sell a bunch of Neo Geo games. Again, you would have to price those games aggressively because you're already dealing with a very small market. There's a very small market of people that are out there looking to buy and build a Neo Geo collection. And so if you're going to do something like that, you have to be ready to take a price charting hit, especially if you're selling these games in bulk. Now, if you're selling them individually and you have a network of people and you know people who are looking for Neo Geo games, yeah, you could probably sell them for close to market price, but not everyone is in that circle. I think, though, there are some games that no matter what the market conditions are, there is a strong market for these games and there's always going to be someone ready to buy them. And I feel like that's especially the case with 6th gen when it comes to like GameCube, PlayStation 2, yeah, and like DS and 3DS. I think there's definitely still, I feel like the retro market is strongest there. Like, someone, if you post any one of the Silent Hill games, you're gonna get a response. People want the Silent Hill games. There's gonna be some, because Silent Hill is a popular franchise. A lot of people know about it. It's still very relevant. They're still releasing Silent Hill games on modern consoles. So there's gonna be a strong market for almost any of the Silent Hill games, in my opinion. But a game like Blood Will Tell, I don't know. That's going to be a little bit harder because not many people like know about Blood Will Tell outside of like the hardcore gaming community. It's not a game that a lot of regular, just casual, even semi-casual game collectors won't really know about Blood Will Tell like that. So I think you're going to have, like if I were to try to sell this, I feel like I would have more of a challenge trying to sell that game. Same thing with like the Saturn and Sega CD. If I go and try to post any of these games online right now, I know who my market's going to be, and it's going to be a collector market. And, that's where they're going to start looking at things like condition and stuff like that. When it comes to the GameCube, I feel like the GameCube still has enough steam behind it to where if you were to post GameCube games, you would get traction. However, I feel like when you're looking at like the Mario Party games, Mario Kart, Luigi's Mansion, like these like main state games, these main first party titles, your biggest competition here is going to be GameStop, because GameStop is still selling these games at, market price. So if you were to try and list these games at their market price, someone who has a GameStop account who could get maybe like 10 or 15% off or something like that, they might say, well, I'll just go try to see if I can get a complete copy from GameStop, right? It's not until you start to get to certain games that are a little bit more difficult to find, like Ikaruga, or maybe, Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes, Eternal Darkness, like games like that are going to be games that aren't priced super high to where people can't get them or they just feel too expensive, but they're also not as common out there. So I do think that there's a sweet spot for people who are trying to sell right now. And I think, if you're someone who's looking to downsize, you kind of have to just have good expectations or set your expectations as to what you think you can realistically get for certain games, because there's portions of my collection that I know I'd be lucky if I got 60% of the price charting. But then I have other games in my collection that I know if I were to put it up, it would probably get bid up above price charting, just because the game is really rare. There's not a lot of copies out there and certain people want them. So this is a trend that I am seeing. A lot of people are downsizing. A lot of people are selling. It's kind of funny because it's something that I typically see in the beginning to middle of the summer. I don't really see it as much like going into the fall and the school season, but this is probably going to be the first fall that I see that happening. And I think it's really interesting because usually this is the time where people, they kind of they're kind of satisfied with what they have. And, the last of the gaming conventions are making their rounds, and people are just getting ready to settle in for the winter and enjoy the collection that they currently have. So, does it mean that you can't sell? No, I think, there's always deals to be made. There's always going to be someone out there that wants to buy a video game at some point, somewhere, somehow. It's just, what's the competition like in your local area? What's the competition like online? What's the, how many people want the game that you're trying to sell? It's very, very interesting. And again, this isn't just video games. I feel like it extends to all hobbies. If you have rare action figures, if you have the common action figures that anyone can just get at like, Target or something like that, are those action figures going to sell faster than someone who has maybe a rare vintage 1990s action figure? you know um, or sneakers. You know, if someone is out there trying to sell the recently released shattered backboards, is anyone going to buy that? No, because those sneakers are sitting in most stores. But if someone has a pair of maybe undefeated fours, or if someone has a pair of, bred Air Jordan 1s, maybe something like that will probably sell a lot faster than maybe a pair of rare Air 4s or something like that. So I think it's a very tricky time. And a lot of that steam, man, a lot of that 2020 steam is gone. I see a lot of collectors across different hobbies scratching their heads trying to figure out why the interest in some of these, hobbies and in some of these items isn't what it was, 5, 10 years ago. And there's a subscriber to the channel that always makes the statement that video game collecting is still fairly new when you compare it to like baseball card collecting and comic book collecting and other collecting hobbies. Video games is still fairly new. So everything is going to kind of happen a little bit slower with video games. But I think it's very interesting, and I feel like now more than ever before, the drivers of the market for sure are the resellers, especially when it comes to common titles. If it's not a rare game, if it's not a highly sought after game, it's you're really at the hands of resellers, honestly, because your mom and pop shops are going to pay you pennies on the dollar for those games. GameStop is going to pay you pennies on the dollar for those games. And if you are trying to sell it on your own, you're going to have to heavily discount it against, what the prices that you're seeing, or the competing prices that you're seeing on platforms like eBay or Mercari. So it's a very interesting time. A lot of downsizing going on. I'm seeing a lot of selling going on. I'm just happy that I got rid of a lot of the stuff that I wanted to get rid of when I did. Really, really happy about that. There's definitely more curating that I want to do with my collection, but I was really able to get like the bulk of the stuff that I wanted gone. And we're talking a few $1,000s worth of games. So, I still got the wall. I've still got shelves of Switch games and PS4 games and stuff like that. But I'm sure as the year goes on, I'll be striking more deals and seeing what else I can do to kind of curate. But let me know what you guys think. What are you guys seeing out there? Are you seeing a lot of downsizing in your area? Do you see people adding and building to their collections? I'm interested to know your thoughts. Let me know down in the comments. I'll catch you in the next one. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.